Welcome to this intro to Org Mode tutorial. Org Mode is what you can see on the screenshot here. It's a file format, org, on the one hand, that you use for organized note-taking, project organization, and a lot of stuff, really. It's really powerful. And at the same time, when we talk about Org Mode, we talk about this plugin for Emacs and Spacemacs that allows you to manage your org files and to do very complex things fairly flexibly. You have lots of shortcuts to track the time you work on tasks, to mark them as to do, done, to open your agenda really quickly for the day, and to navigate to different days. You have a calendar, all sorts of things. So that's what we're going to talk about here, about quite a few of the basics, everything you need to get started and be productive with it. But first, let's talk about what org is. Org is a tool to organize your life, your work. As you can see, we can take hierarchical notes with it. So you can organize your notes in trees and in split files and subtrees that you can fold, unfold, and reorganize however you want. So you can change the order of the items, you can hold lists, add TODO items, timestamps, those kinds of things. Then you can use it to write all kinds of documents. I use it to write the readmes on our recent repositories on GitHub, as GitHub will convert the org file to an HTML file, so you can put pictures inside of it. You can create presentations like this one that you can see here with reveal.js. It's made with the org file format. You can use it to manage projects and tasks. And one thing you can do that's especially interesting is it works along with your programming files, because Emacs is a code editor. And so at any time, from anywhere in any code project, regardless of the language, you can use a feature called Alt Capture, and I can capture a task saying, for example, fix this function, and automatically the system will link to that line in that file. And I can then refile it in my to-do list to say I want to do it tomorrow. Press enter, and it has been added to my to-do list for tomorrow, and it will be added to my agenda if there is a precise timestamp in it to do at a certain time during the day. So that is an extremely powerful system to organize all the things you have to fix, to do in your code, or in general. I use it to prepare tasks for my teammates, to manage my pull requests, the issues on GitHub, to keep track of the emails I have to reply to, those kinds of things. As you've seen, you have an agenda on Org Mode, and you can export your files to HTML, LaTeX, reveal.js, so that's what I'm using here for this presentation, but also PDF. I believe you can use PenDoc to export to many formats. It looks like that. Let's talk a bit more about more advanced features that we will not dive into in this tutorial. You can do time tracking, clocking in and out of tasks. You can do spreadsheets, edit spreadsheets, and do scientific calculations, complex formulas straight in Org Mode, and export or import these from CSV files. You can create graphs from these spreadsheets using GNU-plot. You can inline code in your org documents. It's really good if you want to create technical documents, if you do technical writing. There's a lot that you can do, and much more than we can cover in a single tutorial. It would be a bit overwhelming, but it's used in science, it's used for scientific papers, to write books. I've seen it used in all sorts of situations. Now, in this video, and I personally use Spacemacs on top of Emacs. This is a distribution for the GNU Emacs editor. Emacs is a powerful editor for code, for text in general, but that by default is a bit bare bones, and you have to add lots of modules and configure it. Spacemacs takes a lot of that work away from it. So if you want to get started with it, you'll want to get Emacs first. Then Spacemacs, it's a configuration, so a set of settings for Emacs that will make it work a lot better out of the box. And then we have tutorials. You can find the link here on the description to a playlist where we have some tutorials to get you started with Spacemacs. In this video, you will learn to create nodes and subtrees. You will author content, that is to say write, and apply markup to it. Make it bold, italic, those kinds of things. You will learn to mark items as to-do and add timestamps to them to schedule them or add a deadline that we will then be able to visualize in the agenda or the global to-do list. We'll see how to search through your org file, to navigate your tree, and to sort items in a sublist. You can sort it at timestamps, you can sort it by some regex, some text-based sorts. We will see how we can edit data inline as a table. So anytime you can come to a node and you can convert it to a table where you can edit some bits of data that you are interested in. Finally, we will see how to sync all that data with your phone on Android so that you can get reminders on your phone, that you can see your agenda, your calendar, that you can add notes, those kinds of things. Orgzly is free software. It's available on the Google Play Store, probably on Android as well. But without further ado, let's get started. I'm starting, like you, from the homepage in Spacemacs. And we're going to create a new buffer with space B, capital N, and we're going to create a new buffer with N, just a new buffer here. So this is not a file on your disk, this is a piece of text that we edit in memory. Then you can do space to get the list of all the commands that you can run in Emacs here, and we're going to select Org Mode. So now we are writing an org mode file. From there, we can start by inserting a title in our file. You can find some snippets for that using space, I for insert, and S for snippet. And then you can look for title to start with. You will see the notation with the dash mark plus the name of a property and colon. This is a property system in org that allows you to do a lot of stuff. You can create variables if you want and store data into them straight in org. But here we are going to use that for the title of our file. This is going to be my first org file. We can add a description similarly with the dash plus description and colon, and you can describe your file. This will not appear in a final document. This would appear in a reader that would give you some information about the file, but that's about it. Testing the features from org. And you can see how it is in the commented color in my current theme. Testing the features from org. All right, we're going to start creating our tree. To create the trees, you want to write the asterisk key and a space. And in Spacemacs, you will see that they change color. Now I've increased the font size, we can see things a little better. So from there, you want to write whatever the title for this node is. Let's say it's going to be our notes. In Spacemacs, you can press Ctrl Enter to add a sibling to this note. You can instantly get into insert mode if you are using evil mode, and you can write, for example, this is today's schedule. Let's do that, as we'll be doing some scheduling afterwards. From there, automatically when you add text under that node, it will be indented to give your tree some structure. So you can write any note you would like. Today I've had pasta for lunch. Or really you can write something more interesting than that, but that's the idea. Anytime you can convert that note to a different heading or to a subtree using the major mode features in Spacemacs. So comma to access them, and then to insert something you want to type the I key, followed by S for a subtree, a subnode, or comma IH for a sibling, for a new heading at the same level you are currently browsing. So let's add this as a subtree, and then when you press Ctrl Enter, you're going to add a sibling to that entry at that level. What will I have tonight? I don't know. Actually, I just ate dinner, but yep. Anytime you can fold and unfold the entries under a given node by putting your cursor on top of it and pressing tab. And when you press tab multiple times, it's going to cycle by expanding just the list of titles, subheadings that you have there, and expanding the notes. If I add some rubbish text, you'll see that with one tab, I don't see the content of my notes, and with a second tab, I can see it. You can do that globally on your document by doing Shift Tab, and it's going to cycle those notes on the entire document. Now, once you have that, you can keep nesting more subtrees, so you can go as deep as you want in the tree. Note that you can also use the evil key bindings, ZC to close a given node, ZO to open it, and ZR to unfold everything, ZM to fold everything. I went ahead and added a few nodes to talk about narrowing and expanding. Anytime you can focus on parts of your tree by typing comma, S for the subtree, and N for narrow to subtree. This is going to hide everything that is not part of this subtree, allowing you to focus on some part of your file. Another feature that I like in Spacemacs is the focus mode, distraction-free mode. So you can press space, W to go to the window features, C for centered, and then you have capital C for distraction-free mode. It's going to center your buffer, and you will be able to write focusing on one buffer only at a time. If you are just writing, this can be pretty nice. And space WCC to toggle on and off. Now, to get back to your full file, comma, S and capital N to widen. And then you can go back to the top of the file. Note that you can do that on subtrees. So if I'm working on a specific task, I can do comma SN to narrow down to that task, the next prototypes in my Metroidvania game, and comma S capital N to widen again and to go back to my full file. If we take a more complicated file, like the one I use to work on my daily to-do list, if I expand with Shift Tab, you can see that I have many nodes. So for example, when I was preparing the Org Mode tutorial, I would do that, comma SN to narrow down to it so that I can expand the full tree and work on it without being distracted by other tasks or things I don't want to think about right now. Let's talk about formatting text, adding bold, etc. to your text, to your document. You can use the X key commands in Spacemacs, so space X, to do text-related operations. Similarly, in Org Mode or in specific modes like Markdown, if you're editing text documents, you can use the comma and X for text-related formatting options. In the case of Org, you want to select the part that you will outline or that you will modify, then comma X and B, for example, for bold. If I select physics here with VIW for selecting the word, comma XI for italics, I could use C for code, etc. You don't have to use these commands though. You can use VI related commands to not have to visually select stuff. For example, say I want to set movement to a code element. I can do YS, yank surround. This is the evil surround package. So I can surround whatever with a character. So I will do IW, the inner word, with tilde, and this will turn movement into some code element. So imagine that you have variable names in your text. When you edit it, you can then use the dot to replicate that command on anything. If you want to add blocks, then if you want to add literal examples, you can do that by using the begin and end notation similar to our title at the top here. The simplest way to do it is to use a snippet. So Alt M in edit mode to toggle the leader key. Then you can use I for insert and S for snippet and look for example. This is a literal example that you can use for math formulas, for code. It will be using a monospace font in the end. Now, if you want to have source code that you can execute and you can store the result, or you can make blocks of code interact inside of org, this is possible. Instead of example, you'll want to use source. So I'm going to select these 3 lines with Shift V to enter visual line mode, and then navigate to create a selection. And I'm going to replace the example part with source. :S for the sed substitute command, a slash to search for a pattern, so example, and I'm going to add a new slash to substitute it with src, source. There we go. Here you have a source block. Following that, you want to type the name of the language you want to use for highlighting, but not only, because org can compile the code in those blocks and write the result for you in your document, and you can do much more than that, but for that you'll have to check the manual. So Python in this case, and as soon as I type that and I enter the block, you can see in the mode line at the bottom that it detected it's using the Python mode in that block. So from there I can import BPY, so at least I get syntax highlighting doing that, and I could define a new function and yada yada yada. The point is that you can fold these code blocks and you can have syntax highlighting everything you'd want in such a document. Then this is an org mode element, so if you do V for visual selection, you can then use AE to select around the element, so you can select these entire code blocks very easily. You could also do D to delete, AE around the element to quickly delete any of these blocks. I should mention, by the way, that you have 2 text objects for eval that are specific to org files. You have E for elements. So an element can be a paragraph. For example, if I do VAE, it's going to select the paragraph, lines that are together. But if you want to select the subtree, you want to do VAR, select around the subtree if you want. So you can use that if you are on a title to do VAR, so you can quickly select it, copy it, or you can do DAR to quickly delete an entire tree and its subtrees without having to create a visual selection. Again, that's generally the power of using Vim for editing over other tools, but you can use these and you should use these. And so if you have issues with your indentation in your file, keep writing until the end, until you are done, and then you can do equal to automatically indent the lines, and you can do AR to indent the entire subtree. So you can do equal AR to indent the entire subtree in one command. I almost forgot to talk about lists. You can write lists inside of your subtrees, starting with lots of characters. In general, you can use a plus, you could use a dash like so for an unordered list. You can write a number of items like so, item 1, item 2, and you can create sub-items. So when you use the O key to create a new line, org will automatically detect that you are in a list and add a dash or the character that you are using. Then you can tab and shift tab to create sub-elements. And once you export the file, these will look like different nodes, different bullets if you want. Then you can create ordered lists instead of unordered lists by starting with one dot, like so. And Control-C, Control-C to recreate the numbers for the lists, and automatically as you insert new elements, org will recalculate the starting number for each element. You can mix the lists. You could change a sublist into an unordered list. It has so the sub items, you could list some properties or things like these. Now we can go a little further than that. In these lists, you can add brackets with a space inside, and you will see that the character is in bold. Then you can Control-C, Control-C in this bracket to check the element. So you can use that for checkmarks. It's quite interesting when you are using it in combination with the TODO system that we're going to see in a second. If on the title of your subtree, you add brackets with a slash in between. When you do Control C, or when you update a check mark, you will see that the element updates in the title of your subtree, which is really nice for subtasks, so small things you want to not necessarily track with the clock that are part of a bigger task, but when you want to break down things that you have to do. For example, a buy list or a groceries list. Time to prepare the tasks for our agenda. We are going to mark some items as to do and see how to work with timestamps and to schedule tasks. When you're on any subtree, you should be able to use the T key to turn it into a to-do item, or Shift and going to the right to add this to-do tag to it, and Shift left to remove it. Actually, Shift right and left do more than that. They are going to cycle through the keywords that you have defined in your dot file. By default, you should have to do, progress, and done maybe. I'll show you how to change these in a second and define your own. Then you can use Shift up and down to change the priority of the task. The higher the priority, the higher the task will be in your to-do list when you look at the tasks. So let's say I have to do all three of these. Then I want to schedule them in my agenda. I will use comma to access the org mode features. Then I can use the D for dates. And then you can choose D for a deadline, which will show in advance in your agenda as something to do. You can use T for just a timestamp to put it somewhere. Even in your agenda, it will be recorded, but it won't be in a particular color, or it won't stand out. And S to schedule the task, in which case you will see the agenda view, from which you can use Shift plus the arrow keys to navigate the days. And in the mode line at the bottom, you can type the hour and the duration of the task. So you have to write it in this format. Say I want to do it today at 2 p.m. I will use 14:00. And if I expect that this will take 2 hours, I can do +2. And it will mark it as being today from 2 to 4 p.m. You can then press enter and see the syntax in pure text. It's scheduled for today a bit later. From there, you can modify the date by going to any place on your scheduled part and do Shift up and down to change the days. You can change the months the same way, or you can go on the name of the day. It will work as well. And you can go to the hour to change the hour without changing the duration. You can then modify the minutes as well, move into 5-minute increments if you go on the minutes. And if you go to the end time, however, you will modify the duration of the task in this case. Okay, so let's mark the others as being scheduled. This one would be for tomorrow all day, and I can add a deadline for the next prototype. So I will do $DD and mark the deadline for today at 18 o'clock. And I don't need a duration in this case because it's not a task that I'm going to do. It's the time I need to have this finished. Then you want to register this as an agenda file as part of the files that Org will check to build your agenda. I'm going to press Alt-X and look for agenda, and then you can add the file to front. So if you look for agenda, file, and front, you will find that command. Control-C and open angular bracket. I'll press that, and then when you go comma A for agenda, you can then generate a new agenda view. You can do a few things. For one, you can do T to have a list of all the to-dos that you have. And at the top, you can see here, we have our 3 tasks from the tutorial. From there, you can anytime press enter to jump to the file and the corresponding task. As you can see at the top, you can press a number followed by the R key to rebuild the list if you have lots of to-do items. For example, I can do 3R to see everything that is done already, 2R to see everything that's in progress, and 0R to see a full view of all my tasks. Then I can go comma AA to build the agenda. And you will have the agenda for the day, for example. I'm going to press D to switch to the day view. And I can now see my tasks, including the deadline in the tutorial file here. And I should be able to see also here recording the kinematic body 2D tutorial. It's mixed with my daily schedule, but this gives you an idea of how this works. So from there, you can reschedule anytime from the agenda by doing the same commands, comma, D, S, and you can then change the date. So for example, I can move that to Sunday, and you will see on the right side of the agenda that it is now scheduled for tomorrow. It's going to reschedule. You have to rebuild the view for this to update. Now the task disappeared from the agenda. To control the to-do items that you have when you modify a task or cycle over it and their color, you need to change the variable, the configuration in Emacs. You could use Alt-X and Customize mode to do that, or you can go to your dot file, space FED in Spacemacs, and then you want to look for a few things. So there is the HL to-do keyword faces that allows you, using this syntax, so you use the quote function, and then you are going to create a list of lists which have the keyword, a dot, followed by the color using a hex value. So that's how I get the progress keyword to be blue, the done keyword to be green. Actually, I think this was generated by a recent version of Spacemacs. I didn't do it manually. Then for the to-do keywords that you have access to, you want to use the org to-do keywords variable. So we can set a variable in Lisp, in Emacs Lisp, by opening parentheses. You want to be in your user configuration function here. I'm going to expand it back and jump back to where I was with Control O. So inside parentheses, set Q to quickly set a variable. The name of the variable, so it's going to be org to do keywords in this case. You can place your cursor on it and press K to get some documentation on it. You can see its current value, the original value if you changed it, and the documentation for the variable so that you can know what to type in there. So you want to use a quote to create a list, and you want to nest another list inside of it. Use the sequence function. I don't even know what it does, to be fair. And then you want to create a sequence of strings, so with the to-do keywords, to-do related. So for example, I have to-do progress, but you could have fix me or blocked, those kinds of things. And then you want to add a separator, the pipe key, followed by your keywords to say that the task is done or that it should be considered as done. That's why I have not only done, but also delegated when I send the task to someone else, or I might have cancelled as well. From there, space FE and capital R to reload your configuration, and the keywords will then work in your org file. I'm going to jump back to it. You'll be able to use shift right and left to modify the to-do keyword. Note that when you reach the done state, it's going to close the current task. Not only if you use the clock feature with comma capital C, I to clock in on a task, so you can start to record the time you spent on it. Once you mark the task as done, it's going to close the clock as well. The advantage of using the clock, by the way, is that if a clock is working, you could be anywhere on any file, and you can go to org clock and go to space AO capital CG, or if you're in an org file, comma capital CG, and jump to the last clock. You won't necessarily see the clock from your agenda, but you can use the comma capital C and C to cancel the clock and O to clock out. Once you have timestamps like these, you can easily sort your tasks. I'm going to mess up the order a little bit, and then VAR to select everything inside that tree. You can now do comma S and capital S to fire the sort command. You will see keys at the bottom of the screen to sort by certain properties. And so one I use a lot is T for time, sort by time. It's going to sort them based on the timestamps. Note that if you have tasks that don't have timestamps in the mix, sometimes it doesn't place them at first. It might put them in the second or third position. Use that, knowing what will happen. You can sort by all kinds of parameters using all sorts of conditions. You could use priority. You can use a function, but you can also use the S for schedule, D for deadline, so centered around time created, or using the clocks. And you could use sort by alpha numeric values. It means using the first letter in the title. So P in the alphabet comes before R for record. Note that it's ignoring the progress and to-do keywords. So you can sort tasks in a tree like that. And you don't have to select the content like I did, although you can also sort based on a selection. You can sort subtrees automatically if you place your cursor on a node like so. So I can do comma S, capital S and T to sort again by time. The next feature, which is really useful, is sparse trees, or some kind of search feature if you want. It's going to fold the tree as much as possible, except for the places where you can find some piece of information. To use it, comma S, and you can then you can look for to-do items with T, you can use a regular expression with X, you can look for all deadlines with D. We can do that, so D for deadline. You will see that it will fold the tree. It will place your view so that you can see your deadline. It highlights it really well. If I go to a more complex file, I'm going back to my to-do file here, and I have a lot more notes. There I can do comma SS and then look for to-do items with T. It will automatically fold everything except for the things I have to do in this file. Note that you can organize your projects and your notes into multiple files like I'm doing here. I use 7 of them. And so you can use Sparse Tree to focus on one file, while the comma AT to open the to-do list is going to use all the files that you registered to be to-do files, to contain to-do elements. Same for comma AA, it's going to use all the files that are registered in the agenda. So with Sparse Tree, you can focus on a single file or a specific project, for instance. Here's a feature I just want to introduce you to. If you do Control-C, Control-X, Control-C, you will turn your subtree at points in an editable spreadsheet if you want. This adds columns that you can use to edit the data. So then you can navigate with HJKL or the arrows through the columns and press E to edit the value. In the case of the to-do items, it's going to cycle them. In the case of the priority, so by default, you can see at the top of the screen that you have the column names, and you can customize them as you'd expect. So if you're on the priority one, you can press E to edit the value and then space to remove the priority, or EA, for example, to turn it to an A priority. Now, if you go to the tags column, you can press E to add tags to a note, which you can then later use for search or to organize your notes. If you want to use a tagging system to store information, for example, if you are writing a scientific paper or gathering information, tagging can be really interesting. And the tagging, by the way, you can add them also, so you can quit that view by pressing Q anytime, and you can apply it to any subtree or to really any element in your org file, which can be quite interesting. You can then customize, as I said, the columns. I'll let you check the manual for that. But one thing that you can do so is adding tags. You can do comma IT to insert a tag, or I think you can do it with Control-C, Control-C as well. By default, if you're on a subtree, this will prompt you to insert a tag, and you can also see the history of all the tags that you've been using lately. To customize the columns that you have in this column view, for example, if I go to my to-do file, you will see that I have different columns. I have a few more of these. you can use this syntax I have at the top. So you want to use a dash plus columns at the top of the file, colon, and then for each column that you want, you are going to use the modulo sign followed by a given property that you want to have. So for example, for the first column, if I want to-do items, I will write to-do. You have to look into the docs to see which properties are available, but pretty much everything, every property that you create in org mode, and you can create anything you want, you can use in there. You can also add the width of the column. So if I go to today and I create a column, I have a default size for to do. Maybe I don't want it to be that big, so I'm gonna go back to my to do at the top of the screen and I will limit it to 5 characters by adding 5 to it. Bounce back to my today down there, Control C, X, C. And now the first column is only 5 characters wide. You can see that I'm using 25 characters for the title of the subtree. Then I have some clock, effort, a few things that I'm using. Effort is the property that you use if you want to plan for the time a certain task will take, and then you can compare the time you spent on it, you clocked in, compared to what you expected to spend on it. To use Orgzly, the first thing you want to do is ensure that your org files are in a folder on Dropbox. That's what I use for syncing here. So in my Dropbox folder, I have an org subfolder, as you can see, where I keep all my files. You can get Orgzly on the Google Play Store or on F-Droid. Go to the Google Play app and look for Orgzly, for example. You will then find notes and to-do lists. You can download the app from here. I've already got it installed, so I'm going to open it and we can get started. First, to get the sync to work, you'll want to go to the menu in the top left corner, go down to the settings and set up the sync settings. You want to tap on repositories, add a new one and use Dropbox here. And then you'll want to link your Dropbox using the Dropbox app and to tap the path to the directory. For me, it's /org/ because I'm using the org folder at the root of my Dropbox folder. From there, you will be able to go back to your notebooks, select the 3 dots, the menu, and select sync. It will automatically download all the changes to your phone. If this is the first time you are doing this, it will download the files. And from there, you can open any file you want to work with. So I'm going to go to my first org file here. And you can see that we have our notes. At the top of the screen, you will find the little double arrow that you can press to toggle all the nodes folded and unfolded. You can also tap the little minus or plus icon next to a node. The way you interact with the app might be a bit different from me. I've set the settings so that when I long press on a note, it opens it. For you, doing a long press might select the notes. And for me, it's tapping on the notes that selects them. So you can use that, select multiple node, and then use the cut or copy buttons at the top of the screen, or at the bottom of the screen. You can schedule the notes, you can flag them, you can add a state, to do, etc. You can add a deadline, and you can also mark the notes as done in the bottom right corner. If you want to change the interaction settings, go back to the menu, you'll go to settings, and you want to use the look and feel, I guess. Yes, swap node click and long click actions. The first setting is what I'm using here. You can author the notes, so with a long press for me, you can change the title at the top, you can change the state, etc. I think it's fairly straightforward. Schedule, add a deadline, you can create properties, and you can edit the content at the bottom. Then use the back button to go back to the menu. Use the plus button at the bottom to add a new top level node for which you can write a title, a new task, for example. I'm going to set the state to do and press the OK checkmark in the top right of the screen. You can create a subnode from something by first selecting the node, Then you use the plus button at the bottom of the screen, and you can create a new above, below, so it's going to be a sibling on that of that node, and a new under the current node, which allows you to split the task to add some more information. Note that Orgzly doesn't support absolutely 100% of the features you will find in Org Mode in Emacs. It supports everything that has to do with notes, has to do with tasks. You have the agenda, so if you go to the menu in the top left of the screen and you drag up, you can find your agenda there, and you will see a list of tasks you have in here, starting with the day. You also have the tasks only for the next 3 days. As a default view, you can see your scheduled tasks and your to-do list, followed by your notebooks, all your node files. Now, you don't have to always go to the top right and synchronize all the files. Instead, if you just edited one file, you can long press it and use the upload button. So you have a download button to force load from your Dropbox, and you have an upload button where you can overwrite the remote notebook. Now, my tutorial has changed on the disk. I'm going to go to the menu and reopen it. So if you were editing the file and you made some changes, sometimes you will have to reload the file, but if I do so, you'll see that we can now see the new task node that we created on the phone. Often I will use Orgzly on the go, so I use it to get notifications, those kinds of things, and edit my tasks while I'm out. And when I get back to the computer, I do a sync before opening my org files. One last thing, if you have a task scheduled for a certain time, you will see that you can get notifications on your phone as soon as you reach the time for the task. I haven't checked if there's some property, for example, to make the reminder earlier, 1 day in advance, for example, but you can use these notifications to then mark a given task as done once you are done with it, and you will see it update in the application. We're getting to the end of the tutorial. We've done a bit more than scratching the surface, but still there is a lot to say about Org. If you want to learn about everything it has to offer, or if you are looking for any piece of information about it, anytime you can press Ctrl H and I to go to the Emacs info buffer. Then U to go back up to the top of a hierarchy, and you will see that you have an Org Mode manual, so you can press enter to enter the Org Mode manual, and there you can find a lot of information about everything that you can do with Org. Note that you can press M anytime to open the menu item to look for any part of Org that you would like to get more information about. Say, for example, if I'm looking for information about the spreadsheet, I can type spreadsheet and press enter to jump to the chapter in the Org manual. You can then go back up anytime with the U key and look for all the information that you need, explore to your heart's content. I want to thank you kindly for watching. If you have any questions, please ask in the comments. And that said, be creative, have fun. Let's see one another in the next one. Bye-bye.